The Revolution in France was a civil war, a rising against the ancient regime, or the old kingdom that had risen over centuries. The king, of course, had absolute power, but the nobility and clergy had many privileges that no one else had. Social classes were divided into three estates. First was the clergy, second the nobility, and the third estate was everyone else. Part of the problem was that the growing class of the bourgeoisie had no political privileges. They read Enlightenment philosophies, they saw what happened in the American Revolution, and they resented paying all the taxes. Many saw the old political and social structure as out of date, and the nobles as silly and vain, undeserving of the privileges they had. Many problems converged to create the Revolution: the nobles' refusal to pay taxes, bourgeoisie resentment of the king, Louis XVI's incompetence, and a series of bad harvests for the peasants. The bourgeoisie seized control of the proceedings and declared the creation of the National Assembly, a legislative body that still exists in France today. They wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, modeled after the American Declaration of Independence, and they set about to write a constitution for France.
Karl Marx, a German economist and philosopher who spent a good part of his adult life in poverty, pointed out that the factory workers had genuine opportunities but were being exploited as a consequence of capitalism. Once the class struggle was resolved by the massive uprising of the exploited, Marx predicted that the instruments of power wouldn't even be needed. The impact of Marxism was enormous and served as a foundation of socialism and communism. Marxism impacted social thought and intermixed with capitalist thought to create economic systems that were partly socialist, in which government owned some of the means of production, and partly capitalist, in which individuals owned some of the means of production. Marx's analysis of Britain's Industrial Revolution led him to the conclusion that industrial capitalism was inherently unstable system, doomed to collapse, a revolutionary upheaval that would give birth to classless society, thus ending forever the ancient conflict between rich and poor.
In India, as the Mughal Empire began to decline, Britain and France stepped into power. Britain and France went up against each other in the 7 Years' War during 1756 through 1763 to gain control of India, and Britain won. With this victory, the British East Indian Company was created. It gave Britain control over trade through India. In 1858, the British Parliament stepped in, taking complete control of India. In China, in 1773, opium was introduced into China by the British. This gave Britain the ability to manipulate trade with China. China and Britain fought in the Opium Wars, and Britain won. China tried to gain control again through the self-strengthening movement, but it failed. China was split up into spheres of influence by France, Germany, Russia, and Britain. This forced China to have an open-door policy with trade. In Africa became a hotspot for natural resources and was no longer a part of slave trade. South Africa was a stopping point for trading British ships,